everyone, Keza from IGN here.
Hello, I'm Daniel.
And we're here to discuss the ending of Bioshock Infinite.
Yes.
First thing to say, obviously, I really hope this is obvious, but if you haven't finished Bioshock Infinite, please stop watching, turn it off. Just turn it off right now. You don't want to hear this, you really don't, because the ending of Bioshock Infinite makes all of the rest of it retroactively much better, right?
Yes, definitely.
So, turn it off if you've not seen the ending. Alright? Okay.
Are we sure?
I hope so.
Okay.
I can't see them, but I assume they have. You know, I actually had this game spoiled for me.
Did you?
I did. I was walking past my housemate's room, and he was playing at the same time as me. He was a few hours on. So I was just walking past his room on the way to get a glass of water, walked past, and I heard the line, "Come back with my daughter!" come from his room.
Yeah.
And I was like, no! And that was that. That was
actually wasn't the game, it was just a horrific crime. Anyway, should we crack on?
Yes, let's crack on. So I think the first thing to do is talk about what actually happened, because I will freely admit that by the end of that
really
game,
difficult. Okay.
I was just like, what?
Yeah,
I had to go back and look
Keza,
through.
you go first.
So what happened? Let's start from the battleship scene. So battleship happened. Then essentially we found out that Bioshock Infinite's Columbia was one of an infinite number of parallel multiverse universes, which is pretty basic. Let's say basic, very complicated.
It's pretty basic advanced quantum physics.
Established metaphysics there.
Okay.
So we found out that Columbia was one of thousands of infinite Columbias, and that a different dimension was created for every choice that Booker made throughout his life, and of course for everybody else as well. So we also found out that Elizabeth was Booker's daughter.
And then the second big part of this reveal is that Booker is Comstock.
Yes, of course. Like that is the penultimate reveal, really, isn't it? Is that Booker, it turned out, is also Comstock. As for how that is the case, we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
But Booker sold his baby in order to pay off some kind of debt.
Because bring us the girl, wipe away the debt.
Yeah, and so
at the beginning of the game, it's like all great twists. That bit of knowledge, when retroactively changes everything, gives everything a slightly different significance. So bring us the girl, wipe away the debt. You think it means bring me Elizabeth, the grown-up Elizabeth, the girl you're going to Columbia to save. But obviously in that context, it's bring us your baby, your daughter, and we'll wipe away your debt. So that leads on
so that changes the purpose of Booker's visit to Columbia.
Totally.
Now, obviously, this is where it gets complicated, but the actual universe in which the game takes place is a universe that was created essentially for Booker so that he could go back and assuage himself of his guilt and get his daughter back.
Is it?
Isn't it?
Is it not just the universe in which they one of the universes in which they took Elizabeth?
Yes. Wait. But then the Lutece twins, right?
Okay.
The Lutece twins are the physicists.
Right, okay.
So the Lutece twins came back. This is why we're having this discussion.
You're right.
The Lutece twins came back into Booker's universe and said, Booker, we are creating this universe for you so that you can go and stop Comstock and get your daughter back, essentially, right? Yeah. So the universe that Booker is in actually happened thousands of times.
I actually think we need to skip back a little bit and actually talk about why they took the daughter in the first place. Because what it was, Booker is one person until a certain key moment in his life. Well, Bioshock Infinite takes all around the baptism, in which he absolves himself of sin, and he becomes Comstock, he becomes a fanatic, he creates Columbia, and so on. And the other one in which he remains Booker, and he becomes tortured, and he sells his daughter.
And he goes on to have his daughter as
yes,
well.
He has a
Comstock
daughter.
Never has daughter.
That's the reason. That's the reason they take Anna, i.e. Elizabeth, is because Comstock becomes infertile.
Because of the terror stuff,
because of the machinery that he's dabbling with, and that's why he wants a lineage. He wants to carry on Columbia. He wants a daughter who will eventually lead Columbia, which is a battleship in the air, into New York and destroy the America which he thinks has betrayed the founding ideals of Jefferson, Franklin, and Washington.
And the America that was the source of his guilt with the Boxer Rebellion, with the Wounded Knee Massacre, etc.
So that's why
and she does do that. Yeah. We see a future in which she does do that. Obviously, back in Comstock House, we see old Elizabeth, and we see.
And towards the end of the game, you go into an area where you see Elizabeth as the harbinger of death, almost, or as Comstock would represent it. A shining light, or whatever you want to call it. So
the seeds of fire.
Yeah. So that's why he wanted a daughter, and obviously he wanted a daughter that he was actually biologically related to. So he uses the Lutece technology to open up one of these tears so he could take his own daughter from another reality. But then they use that technology to experiment on Elizabeth to kind of endow her with these special abilities, because she's the only one who can open these rifts without the assistance of advanced technology.
That's right. So Comstock and the Lutece twins figured out how to open these rifts, but Elizabeth has the power to do it just independently, right? Now, what we weren't clear on earlier, we were discussing, is whether she has that power just innately, randomly, or whether it was given to her somehow as a baby.
I think it may be part the fact that she was sort of dragged through time as a child, and they did experiment on her extensively.
Yeah. That was, she lost her pinky, by the way, when she gets dragged through the dimensions. That was because you actually see throughout the game. Like, I remember seeing really early in Battleship Bay. I remember seeing her finger was half missing and thinking, what's that about?
Yeah, they don't reference it that heavily. It's quite subtle.
I
just saw that she had a thimble on.
And then at the end, you've got when Booker finally confronts Comstock, you've just got him going, tell her what happened to her pinky, tell her, and he can't remember, and then he flies into a rage and kills Comstock, obviously, which is himself. So the baptism.
Okay.
This is very complicated. I think one of the great things about Bioshock Infinite is that it's so complicated, and it pretty much pulls it off. Like, usually when there's this many variables in the ending of a story, you can find plot holes quite easily.
Yeah.
I'm sure people on the internet have found plot holes, but I found it kind of fit together quite well.
Yeah, I think there are some, but I think you forgive them because the kind of overall pattern is so beautiful. But the fact that it falls back in on itself again, it almost kind of like you can play the game again and again, and that kind of makes sense. Like the meta game, like you want to start a new game.
It would
makes
be
sense.
It would be different reality every time.
Because what I didn't realise was when right into the end is that the two people in the boat at the beginning are the Luteces. Like, I forgot about that. They're the ones that are bringing you to the lighthouse, and if you play it again, they're bickering. It's instantly recognisable, but because you haven't met them yet, you haven't seen their faces, you kind of forget about them in the boat. But they're bringing you on your journey. There
are things as well within the game that suggest that the reality of the game, like the reality in which Booker has basically been taken by the Lutece twins into an alternate reality in order to get his daughter back, there are things to suggest that he's done this lots of times.
Yes.
Like over and over and over again. And the Lutece twins are with him every single time he does it. Like at the beginning of the game when he flips that coin.
Yeah.
And on the chalkboard, the Luteces
little sandwich board, yeah.
That's right. They have the heads and tails tally on there. That suggests that Booker's been through this a lot of times. And the Lutece twins always seem to know what's going to happen with him, because they've seen it happen lots of times before, right? And so the only time that it's ended is this one time, right? Mm-hmm. When at the baptism. So now here's a question for me. When Booker is drowned by Elizabeth at the baptism, at the moment of the baptism.
Yes.
Now, I've heard people say that means he doesn't die, only Comstock dies, but Booker remains alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at killing himself at the moment of the baptism, he's only killing the version of himself that accepts the baptism and therefore goes on to be Comstock.
That would make sense, yeah.
Right, so if he hadn't gone under the water...
Because when they originally go to that scene in the kind of spring water, Booker says that he walked away before he got to that point.
Yeah.
So you're killing the kind of the Bookers that accept that
So
destiny.
essentially the second he goes under the water, it's the Bookers from that instance that he kills off. Yeah. And that actually leads us on to the post-credits scene.
Okay.
Because presumably then the Booker that didn't go on to become Comstock continues to exist, so that Booker continues to have Anna.
Yes.
And is reunited with Anna.
Yes, I am with you.
Yeah.
You almost do it one more time around where post-credits you see the door slowly opening, and it's quite, it's like the Inception ending. There's a moment of kind of finely poised ambiguity where is she going to be in that room? Has he had this life, or is this again another parallel instance of this? I don't...
That really affects how you take the ending as well, because it's a very sad ending in some ways. I mean, it's sad that... that's another thing, does Elizabeth die? Because obviously Elizabeth dies, the version of Elizabeth.
Multiple versions do, yes.
The version of Elizabeth that ever existed in Columbia dies, which is sad because that's the Elizabeth you've been through the whole game with, and the Elizabeth that you've seen kind of... you've developed this relationship with, and I find that sad, but the fact that she and Booker are possibly reunited when she's a baby, that's a happy ending in a way.
What I would like to talk about, because you used the word earlier, variable, and the phrase that kind of stuck with me a lot when the end of the game, this is what I almost found more interesting than the kind of time travel and the relationship between Comstock and Booker, was the idea of parallels and constants, and particularly the scene where they go back to the original Rapture.
That was very, very cool.
Because all the way through the game I was thinking, is there going to be some kind of reference, a poster or something? And they actually just take you there. And when they're walking through that very iconic setting, she says, it's always about constants and variables. There's always a man, there's always a city, there's always a scientist, there's always a girl. And the other thing that really struck home with me was at the end, when you saw all the multiple versions of Elizabeth, I just thought, little sisters.
Yes.
That's all I thought.
Yes.
Is little sisters.
Absolutely. And obviously there is an implication there as well, because Booker can operate those bathyspheres.
Now, which only Andrew Ryan
only
or
Andrew
his
Ryan's
offspring
family can operate that. So maybe it's the suggestion that Booker is, he will be Comstock, he will be Andrew Ryan, he will be that desperate.
Yeah, and most of Bioshock Infinite, you're basically moving between very proximate alternate universes, alternate realities of that one.
So
whereas Bioshock could be a further one away.
Yeah.
Because there are fundamentals there. I think you can probably read too much into that, but it's probably one of the most exciting and tantalising ways of interpreting Bioshock Infinite. The other thing would be the Songbird and Big Daddy, because Jeremiah Fink, in one of the voxophones, he looked at Rapture through a tear, and he says he saw the technology of man being kind of fused with machine.
Hence Songbird.
Yeah.
And obviously Songbird, the first thing you notice about him if you play Bioshock was, he looks a bit like a Big Daddy.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the game goes on, you start to realise that they can look into other worlds. I didn't get that particular voxophone. I found it, in my second playthrough I found it. And that was really interesting to me, the thought that, you could look into these parallel universes for inspiration that then drags into your own.
And it's there kind of subtly, they kind of lay that seed very early on with the kind of barbershop singing God Only Knows by the Beach Boys, and Girls Just Want to Have Fun, Tainted Love. All those songs have kind of kind of spilled through time.
What was it? I think it was Tainted Love. There was another one as well. It wasn't Half the World. But another song that came from, I think it was a 90s or 80s song, and I just thought, that's anachronistic. And then of course the game ends, and you're like, oh no, it's not anachronistic at all. Yeah. That's just how the game works. But then also, hence Bioshock Infinite.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole the whole premise is that this story can happen with subtle variations infinitely, which of course is very convenient for a video game franchise as well.
Like, speculating a little bit. Well, actually, before we go on to that, we should say that I think you and I both thought it was kind of just wanted to tell you that story rather than be a shooter necessarily. That was, Because one of the parallels for me that really doesn't add up, and John Tetty talked about this over the weekend, was the fact that Vigors make a reappearance and they're kind of a parallel to plasmids. Because plasmids kind of made a lot of sense in Rapture, where you had this whole society which was all about self-improvement.
Yeah.
And the next step of self-improvement would be kind of splicing your own genome to take you beyond what you could achieve biologically or innately. That doesn't really fit into a world that is founded upon racial purity.
Exactly, and also it doesn't fit into a world that is so tightly controlled as Columbia is. Like, I mean, that doesn't work.
It's just bizarre that nobody else uses them.
That's another thing, because obviously they're advertised everywhere. There's all the posters, and no other
Comstock
person
seems quite pro them. Like, he's not stamped them out.
But no other person in that entire universe uses them ever once, except, I mean, the crows but they don't use plasma, do they? Like, the Order of the Crow guys, they disappear into a flurry of crows, so presumably they got something supernatural going on. But is that a plasmid? I don't know.
Very rarely they're used against you. It seems more
I don't think I ever once.
There's guys who launch fire, so there's kind of equivalent powers, but there's nobody who really. But that seems more done through machinery rather than the vigor.
Like the handyman.
Yeah.
Or like any of the other kind of cool machinery that exists in Columbia. And I think that's obviously just a gameplay restriction.
Yeah.
Like, another interesting parallel here is that Ken Levine is kind of trapped into only making this one game.
Yeah.
I mean, seemingly making this one
Ken
game.
Levine Infinite.
Ken Levine Infinite. That's a good video.
Yeah.
But he's trapped into making this one game that's a shooter, because, as you were saying earlier, for a game to have this amount of ambition and this amount of money go into it, that it has to be marketable, and for it to be marketable, it has to be a shooter. Levine's been open about this.
Yeah. If you want to make something with that kind of production value and kind of narrative ambition, you've got to smuggle it in with shooter elements, I guess. I mean, that's kind of sad, but it's kind of a harsh reality. I just want to talk a little bit more about the twins.
Yeah, I think they were really cool.
They were really, really cool, and I've only played the game once, and I think going through again, I think a lot of their lines will take on additional significance. But the one that I really remembered was Rosalind saying to Booker, said, on her brother's, like, he only sees a blank page where I see King Lear.
Yeah.
So I think even though they are technically kind of the same person, he's just her from another universe that she's dragged through. They have very different views on what's happening here, because he's very much kind of, I think he believes in some sense of free will, where she can only see the tragedy that's always going to befall Booker.
That's an interesting way of interpreting that one, actually, I see that. I found interesting as well, when you, in the final third of the game, once you've discovered Tears, and once you've had that battle with the deceased Lady Comstock, pretty much all the voxophones you're discovering at that point are Rosalind. And it's really interesting, because you can see basically she glimpses this kindred soul in another universe, and basically the whole motivation for her figuring out how to use this quantum technology. I mean, she's presumably at this point already found out how to use quantum technology to make a city float.
Yeah.
And she talks about her experiments with apples and with fleas, and she invents
the city float.
Yeah, so quantum mechanics is what's making the city float. But her whole motivation for developing this tear technology and this universe spanning stuff is to get to this kindred soul that she's found in another universe, who's also presumably experimenting in his universe.
Yes,
with the
and
same
then they
stuff.
meet. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an amazing.
I know it's,
and that's why when Comstock has them assassinated, which he tries to do, they don't die.
Yeah.
They just end up existing between dimensions.
Not fixed within time. It's kind of like they're kind of like Downton Abbey meets Quantum Leap, which I think is probably the ideal television show.
Another great line in the game. The delicious question is when.
Yeah.
Why do you ask what?
When the delicious question is when.
So the Lutece twins, I think they were such a cool motif throughout the game as well.
Yeah.
This recurring.
But what I find interesting about them, I think they want to stop Comstock. They want to bring Booker through, but at the same time, they have this very, like scientists, like brilliant scientists, they have a very cold intellectual interest in studying it and seeing it play out infinitely. They're recording it, they're observing it. They're kind of having this kind of really kind of dry, slightly sardonic fun with it.
I love the way they bicker as well.
Yeah.
Just on a basic level, that's
You
very
would bicker with
entertaining.
yourself.
Of course you would, yeah. I bicker with myself a
I
lot.
would bicker with a female version of myself.
But the way they and all the choices that they give you now and then,
Yeah.
and they go like, even choosing between this is something.
It's a necklace.
Are there implications for that?
This is why I wondered, what did you pick?
I picked the bird.
I picked the bird as well.
Everyone picks the bird, obviously, because it's
Yeah.
freedom as opposed to
The cage.
entrapment. And nobody wants to pick entrapment. That's not a positive symbol.
Because obviously with the coin you have no,
Yeah.
you
can't
it
choose.
again. Like in real life, the game takes that away from you, whereas the game presents you with the choice when it gives you a choice. Do you want this necklace and this necklace?
It's when old Elizabeth gives you that little cipher
Yeah.
to explain how to control Songbird as well, and she draws a cage on it. I was
Yeah.
like, ooh, I bet that's to do with the necklace, but then obviously it can't be because
I thought that, yeah.
because BIRD is not a sequence of chords, so it couldn't be the other way around.
Yeah.
And whereas CAG obviously is the sequence of chords that you have to use to control Songbird for yourself. So we've been through what happened,
Yeah.
and really gone very in depth into the Lutece twins. One thing that I'm still not clear on here, right,
Okay.
is how, in the first place, Booker giving his baby to the Lutece twins,
Wipes away
how does that wipe away whatever debt he has? What debt is it that he's...
I think that's purposely vague.
Like, is
what
he... That's so weird.
I can only guess how they represent themselves to him, whether they have some power and money, but it kind of leaves that detail out.
But even so, how would Booker have got into gambling debt to Comstock or the Lutece twins?
Or
Like,
it might be to a third party,
Yes.
and they've appeared like some kind of,
Yeah.
we can help
Deus
you out
Ex
with this.
Machina.
Yeah.
Oh, if you just give me your baby, then
Yeah.
I will pay off that guy.
I think the emphasis on that is more on how low and terrible was Booker to give away his daughter.
After I got past that, I was.
But
very
that
much
is,
like,
I think
how does
that's
that make sense?
really one kind of major blank that kind
Yeah.
of needs filling in. I think
was
they kind
that.
of probably thought of the line, bring us the girl and wipe away the debt, and then like,
But like, it makes more sense that, I mean, I understand Booker voluntarily entering into this potentially infinite universe loop
Yeah.
in order to get his daughter back. I understand why he would want to do that. But what I just don't understand, firstly, why would you give away your daughter? But
yeah.
that's fine.
And
I
it's
can
not
get
really
past
that entertaining to find out that he has a
No.
really bad bingo habit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the debt also is left. Like maybe. No, I thought about this. Maybe it's not a gambling debt. Maybe it's not. Maybe he has such a. Maybe he's so tortured. Maybe he basically prays to God for forgiveness, etc. And the Lutece twins arrive as if by magic to say, "Give us your daughter. We'll wipe away your debt," as in your moral debt.
Yeah.
Maybe. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
The other question is what happened to Anna's mother. But there is a line in the game that I think
He says she dies in childbirth.
she says she doesn't. He says she
And
dies
I
in
think that
childbirth.
they've just very neatly. It's very complicated to us. I think they've kind of just neatly
That's
put that
packaged
to one
off.
side. Yeah.
Yeah. So something I didn't get actually my first playthrough. I finished this game in 2 sittings, and the second time through I was desperately rushing through to get to the end because I had to go somewhere. And at the end, the bit where you're at the baptism,
Yep.
and Booker's standing there, and you've got all the Elizabeths, and one Elizabeth's like, "You are Booker DeWitt," and the other's like, "You are Zachary Comstock," and he goes, "I'm both." Ding. I was
Yeah.
like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah. It does it quite suddenly. I think it really just expects a lot of you as a player, which is actually quite
That is
flattering.
good,
It's
it's
quite nice.
refreshing.
It's like something like Inception,
It
where
doesn't
it's
insult
not
your
going to.
intelligence.
It's not patronising, and it makes you work for it to a degree. I kind of had a suspicion for a while that was going to be the case, and the moment when you drown Comstock in the font earlier on the ship, I thought when you were drowning him, you'd look down on his hand and see an AD, and then when I didn't see that, I was like, oh, it's not. But then, of course, it is, because he would never have AD on his hand because he never lost the doctor.
Yeah, he never had... AD being Anna DeWitt,
Yeah,
obviously.
Anna
So
DeWitt.
he never lost. And I think it's really interesting that he seemed to think that that would remind him.
Yeah.
And also that the universe that Booker managed to create and the Lutece twins created for him worked itself around the features of his life.
Well,
around that AD.
Yeah, because I imagine Comstock would have knowledge, because I bet he would occasionally peer in on the person whose daughter you stole. You would check in on him, because
see what he's up to.
That might be someone who
see if he's had any more kids he might be coming.
Or coming to kill you.
True.
And he could see they had this AD, so he goes, "Well, I'll create and manufacture a myth around this." Yeah,
in case he ever comes.
Yeah, it's a perfect security system. Yeah. Everyone will be looking for this man, because from the moment of their birth, they've been told this is the Antichrist, essentially. So
at the moment of the baptism. So, as far as I understand it, essentially, Booker, if he had got baptized, in all the universes where he did get baptized, he reinvented himself as Zachary Comstock and went on to found Columbia.
Yes.
Right?
That's my understanding.
Cool. And then when he doesn't get baptized, he stays as Booker DeWitt, goes on to Havana.
Yes.
Okay.
That is my understanding.
Good.
Now that Infinite's done, and it's kind of established this kind of meta mythology of the Bioshock universe with lighthouses and dystopias and men with dreams and men who destroy those dreams and the girls that you need to protect.
And tyrants.
What's the next Bioshock? Is there a next Bioshock? Do they need to leave it alone? This almost feels like the culmination of Bioshock.
Yeah,
this almost feels like the third game.
Yeah, it's like the revelation of what's
it's the Looking Glass moment where you're like, whoa, and then...
And also, like, I would have preferred, if there'd been maybe 4 or 5 Bioshocks with lighthouses, with tyrants, etc., then that
it's
revelation
a cumulative
would have
effect,
been, like,
isn't it?
That would have been amazing. Whereas now the revelation's already there, so next time we play a Bioshock, it's going to be like, kind of know what to expect.
It's going to be back to the first one, almost.
Yeah. I think it kind of operates a bit like Assassin's Creed's Animus, though, in theory. In that the Animus provides infinite possibilities for you to go back to any point in time and relive it. And so, therefore, you could have essentially a almost unlimited number of Assassin's Creed games.
Yeah.
Set in different periods of history with different people. It's the same for this multiverse framework now for Bioshock Infinite. You can now have as many Bioshocks as you care to create. But my question is, would Ken Levine want to create another one?
It's almost fulfilling his destiny.
The infinite loop.
Yeah.
He can only create Bioshock from this moment forth until he drowns himself with a baptism.
I'm sure whatever he does will be immensely interesting. I just think you couldn't make another straightforward game, and it feels like this is the really clever one that kind of...
Yeah. I mean, could you make another shooter with vigors and shooting with the same kind of...
I think the only part that I disliked about the game, and maybe dislikes probably too strong, is the kind of vigors. To me it felt... we need to give you a bit more gameplay. Whereas I would have been quite happily just walking through the story.
I guess most people wouldn't.
Yeah, most people wouldn't.
But I really enjoyed the original Bioshock combat of vigors and shooting, and I'm not very good at military FPSs because I run in a lot. That's how I play shooters.
You were terrible.
I just run in and shoot stuff. So with Bioshock, that's great because you run in, you blast someone, you shoot them, and it's much more fun than hiding behind a bit of rock and peering through a sights, which is what I don't like in shooters. So I find that type of first-person shooter combat more interesting to me than most other shooters. But at the end of the day, it feels like Bioshock's limited by being a shooter in some ways.
Yes.
And you wonder where it can go from here. And if they're going to make essentially the same game with the same themes again and again and again, will it still hold?
What I kind of hope is, shooters have been popular, but shooters have become really popular with this generation. Taste might change, and that might permit a slight shift in genre. Might open more possibilities, more lighthouses.
Yeah, that would be good.
So that's our kind of feeble attempt to explain what happened in Bioshock Infinite. Do you feel enlightened?
I think discussing it with someone really helps you to actually understand.
It's like therapy.
It is a bit like therapy because there's quite a lot of complicated stuff, like we said.
This was your intervention. Okay, so that's what we thought. Let us know what you thought. And for everything Bioshock Infinite, keep it on IGN.